Hello and welcome to the first online edition of the Internationales Frauenfilm Festival Dortmund+Köln. We're here today with the filmmaker Arami Ullón, who directed the film Nothing But the Sun. This is a documentary that is being screened in our Panorama section of the festival, and we're very happy to share it with you and for you to join us in this Q&A. My name is Jimena Aguilar, and I've been supporting the curating process of the Panorama section for this year's festival. So, Arami, the film presents us with Mateo, a historian trying to preserve his community's collective memory through audio recordings and tapes, and also by allowing you to follow him through this film. After having this experience, why do you think memory and preservation of memory can be an important tool for people and communities who have experienced violence or traumatic situations?
Well, memory to me is fundamental in processing the shock that they went through, and also it has to do with the Ayoreo culture itself. This tradition of preserving memory. The Ayoreo culture is based on oral narration, and they really take their time to remember collectively, and the exercise of remembering help them to develop an understanding for what has happened to them. And it also allowed them to understand their rights. And it's important to say here that the concept of private property is completely alien to the Ayoreo culture, to the Ayoreo people. So through talking about it, through try to understand, through memory, they have finally came to the conclusion that it's their right to get their territory back. So I think this process of memory is fundamental also in creating alternative for the future and deciding a standing point, political standing point also in front of the situation they are facing.
And now that you mentioned that the concept of private properties is foreign to them, in the film you can really tell how there's a deep connection with nature and how that they've kind of been uprooted from that. What relationship do you see there between subjects like climate change and indigenous communities, for example, and they're uprooting from these spaces?
Well, we know that the indigenous peoples around the world are the ones who are actually taking care of the last forest that we have in the world. And talking about Paraguay specifically, the deforestation rate is the fastest in the world. We deforest around 400 hectares per day, and that means that the climate in the Chaco and in the whole region, including other parts of Paraguay, is changing very, very fast, and we can see the consequences. You can also see in the film a sequence of dead animals, and for example, this experience of being in the Chaco shooting and finding all the time dead animals because they cannot find any more food, they cannot find water any longer. It's really a clear sign of what is happening with the deforestation and in connection to the climate change.
One of an interesting part in the film, I thought, was when one of the characters, Mateo, is interviewing, tells him that he acknowledges the contradictions that they're living with, and as a Ayoreo community living in white spaces, but also not being able to return, and having this longing, and also the contradictions of culture and religion. What contradictions did you face as a filmmaker, and which contradictions should we as an audience be faced with by this film?
Yeah, first I would like to say that I don't particularly like to refer to it as a contradiction, because it gives the idea that the Ayoreo are somehow contradicting themselves, and that is not exactly what happens. I see it more as a constant process of adaptation in order to survive, and that process confronts them, for instance, with the fact that the groups of power that took them out of their lands, killed their families and groups, and forbid their culture, are the same people who are their potential employers, for example. Yeah. So I don't find it as a contradiction. I just find it they need to find a balance in order to be able to live and survive in these new conditions that were imposed to them. And it's also important to say that they really are not in white spaces. They are left in spaces where life is barely impossible. So they are left in places where the white people are not living, and these new places where they are now, the displacement brought them to these spaces, have no vegetation, have no access to water, has no access to animals for them to hunt. So it's really not being able to go back to the forest, but also the societies that are surrounding them are not allowing them any space. So yeah, and of course we needed to face many processes of adaptation that sometimes was difficult to fully understand. And I think that is one of the reasons why it took us very long time to start shooting. We did a very, very long process of research.
Yeah, I read in an interview you gave that you were doing research for 3 years before starting to shoot. What this research process entail?
Well, first of all, I needed to understand a very, very complex situation that needs time. It required me to study a lot, to spend a lot of time in the Chaco, which is a very wide territory with many different cultures. I needed to spend a lot of time in the Ayoreo communities, listening to the stories, especially from a certain moment, to especially listen to Mateo and what he needed to share with me in order to find what the film was going to be about. And at some moment after 3 years, or maybe even more, I felt that the subject of this film is the losing of home and the possibility of getting it back, and that resonated very much with Mateo. And so together we started a new process that also took many years, because we started a conversation about what is the meaning for him to lose home, and we started also thinking who are the Ayoreo members who can help us tell the story. And so the second part of my research was more specific, and it was going to meet these people, meet their families, spend time with them, and listen to their stories, always with Mateo.
Mhm.
I think that's why it took a very long time, and it was necessary. And even when we started shooting in 2016, that was the first shooting period. The research didn't stop there. After this first shooting period, we researched more, and I can even say that after finishing all the shooting periods in 2019, we continued to research during the editing process.
One of the, as you mentioned before, the culture and religion that they now are in this relationship with was imposed to them, and there's a little bit, you can see the church, a bit of the state too, in the film, and at some points, some of the characters, including Mateo's wife, mentioned that there's a tension with the community because they're, as you said, like they're assimilating to try to survive in the situation they're in. And how did this tension influence the film or the shooting process?
Yes, part of our research was to understand these tensions. And I can say that after these many years, I cannot fully explain all the different tensions that can be found in these ayoreo circumstances. But we needed to be constantly observing, being very aware and sensitive to these tensions. And I particularly took the decision of stop recording, or even sometimes maybe stop being in the community if my presence or the presence of the crew was going to increase any sort of tension in the community. Of course, there is a tension regarding Mateo's work because it is a work that is encouraging people to practice their own traditions, including shamanism, including natural ways of healing that goes directly against the teachings that they received from the missionaries. So this is one aspect why there is tension. There is also tension because some ayoreo may have an idea that trying to keep these traditions are putting them in more trouble. Mm-hmm. So a part of them would prefer just to leave this aside and try to find a way to just belong more and more to the Western way of thinking. So there are always these tensions, but I think we were very aware of it, and we always tried to find a way through dialogue with the people. But this tension didn't happen, for example, with all the protagonists of the film, because we were working with people that really had this tragic destiny, this tragic story of violence, and all of them felt the need of telling this story. Even people that might be now part of the church, for example.
And where do you see the role of the state in this constellation? Like, how does a state that has been part of this uprooting process guarantee afterwards the rights of the ayoreo community?
Well, they are absent. They are completely absent, but at the same time, they are completely responsible for the situation they are in. And I'm saying completely because historically the Paraguayan state has given indigenous lands to groups of economical or political power, and they work on creating the image that the Chaco region was a vast but empty territory, that they encourage this idea that it was a no man's land and that it could be taken. And that is the beginning of this whole colonialization, neo-colonialization that has been happening in Paraguay, where the government allowed this invasion of territory.
And to come to an end with our Q&A, I would like to ask you, like, how are you going to present the film to the Ayoreo communities, and what are your expectations of this moment?
Well, we couldn't release the film in Paraguay yet, especially because of the sanitary situation Paraguay is going through. But we are preparing mobile cinema, a small mobile cinema that we will bring to the Chaco, to the Ayoreo communities. And I think I'm really looking forward for that moment. This film was made in alliance with the Ayoreo people, with the Ayoreo communities. So I am looking forward to finally be able to show them the work we did together, where they are the protagonist and where they have the voice.
I hope it really goes well, and hopefully we'll be able to see some of the behind the scenes of that mobile cinema. Thank you so much for joining us, Arami.
Thank you so much for this space, and I hope people enjoy the film and get to know the Ayoreo situation.